Okay, we're live. We're here. This is ThinkTech. It's new media, the bleeding edge. It's Monday at 4 o'clock, and wow, we're finding breaking news on social media, namely by way of Context. Context is a company that's spun out of Ikezo, and Dan Leuck, who established Ikezo, is the CTO and the founder of Context Inc., a Hawaii corporation.
Yes, it's a Delaware corporation, but it's
smart,
based here.
Smart. If you can look for capital,
because it was we took
Delaware,
capital, so
Delaware's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, so Dan Leuck is normally the host, but in this case, Dan Leuck's the man with the information, so we made him the guest instead. That way, we get more out of him. Okay.
I appreciate that, Jay.
And you want to point that screen down so we can see your smiling face.
Sure.
There it is. Anyway, so Dan, what is this thing, Context? I mean, we started out by saying it's a spin out from Ikezu, and spin outs are always good, but what does it do?
Well, about 2 years ago, really going back 2.5 years ago, we were working on a project that was originally for a government customer, and what we were doing was looking at social media in Japan and looking for sentiment, people's general feelings about things that the United States military was doing in Japan. And that was something that when I talked to our finance customers about, they became excited about applications of it to find people's opinions of and just breaking news that has the potential to affect the valuation of a financial asset. And so we just
financial asset
of like a company, for example. So let's say that someone does a tweet that they work for Foxconn and there's going to be a riot at Foxconn. That's going to, when people find out about that, that's going to...
Foxconn, I want to know about that.
It will affect Foxconn and it will affect Apple because they produce the
everything
iPhone.
for Apple, yeah.
So, the interesting thing is, these days over 500 million tweets are being tweeted around the world, and then there's people doing Weibo in China, fastest growing social network in the world, and other sources. When you have over 500 million posts coming through Twitter alone, there's tons of news in there, but it's hard to find it. It's a signal to noise ratio problem. And so what people often end up doing is they look for people that are reliable, that they know, and they follow them and look for things that they write. But when you do that, everyone kind of coalesces on the same lists. And so you don't find if someone, like some random person who works at Foxconn writes something like that, you would never know about it because you wouldn't know to watch them. And you can do keyword searches, but that's also imperfect because people aren't always using the words that you expect when they express themselves. So what Context really does is when we repurposed it for finance, we started focusing more on breaking news, and sentiment became just a feature. We made a deal with Twitter to have access to the entire fire hose, so over 500 million tweets per day.
Worldwide?
Worldwide. So we look at every tweet that is tweeted. We have access to it.
Here?
Sorry?
Here?
Anywhere in the world.
So, no, but I mean, where do you look at it?
What we do is...
Can you look at it off that laptop?
We can, yes, absolutely.
Oh, how interesting. Okay.
So we have our application that runs in the cloud, and it's connected to Twitter's cloud. You could think of it that way. Mm-hmm. And Twitter, it's called the fire hose, and that's a very accurate description, is basically pushing all of this. We have various ways that we scan the fire hose, and then we get all of these tweets pushed to us. And we use a variety of techniques, statistical modeling, natural language processing, to see if somebody is writing something that's likely to affect an asset, to affect a company. And then we take those alerts and we send them to people who are in trading entities, banks, hedge funds, investment management companies. So
let me reel it back a little bit. Okay, so you get access through the cloud to all these 500 million tweets every day, which are no more than 140 characters, and sometimes they're arcane, like who are you, where are you, whatever. I mean, just things that really don't have a lot of information in them.
That is one of the challenges, is that often you see a tweet and it's really in the middle of a conversation.
Yeah.
And the other thing that, it's actually kind of good for us because it's an area where we've tackled a hard problem that's very domain specific. If you look at the way that people write on Twitter, it's evolved into a dialect. It's almost a dialect of English, like Twitter Creole, you could say. And so when you take tools that have been created to scan very well-formed reports, things that are filed with the SEC or whatever, and you try to point that at a tweet, the software doesn't know what to do with that because it's used to perfectly formed English that's in context.
Yeah, that's an interesting question comes out of that, about evidence. I mean, a tweet could be evidence, but for what? You have to understand the, may I use the word context? Because I suspect that's where context came from.
There, yes, pun intended.
Pun intended, okay. So you have to look at all the tweets in the conversation together to get the meaning of this one arcane, very ambiguous tweet that you're trying to make into evidence.
Yeah, so there's content, there's context analysis, and it's beyond just the actual content of the tweet. You have to know, if you don't know the person, if it's not someone that you have recorded as being reliable, you have to figure out, is this some random nutter, or is this a person that's likely to be saying something that's true? And so there you have to look at things like, if you tweet something, I don't know you, but I know that someone else that I trust follows you, then that's a simple example of using graph analysis to figure out if you're likely to be a reputable person. And so if Warren Buffett follows you, you probably are someone
Probably okay.
Yeah, you're probably okay, and we'll take that, and we'll.
And if I am Warren Buffett, I'm really okay.
If you're Warren, we do explicitly have people listed as kind
right?
of green pass as well. But the challenge there is a lot of times people have those lists. We have the largest set of lists of people that write about these various sorts of things. So our lists are very valuable to us, but it's that little bit you find on the edge where it's somebody that you've never heard of before that's written something interesting.
You have to make a judgment about him, and maybe
Right.
you can, maybe you can.
Right, and you have to do it in an automated way.
Yeah.
Doing things like the graph analysis.
So I get this feeling that the 500 million tweets is just text, and so you could actually put it in a document. You could put it in a database if you like. It's coming at you, as a stream of text, right?
It's coming to us as more than that. So when there's a tweet, you have the 140 characters that you see, but there's lots of other data there.
Yeah.
You know, the metadata about a tweet, the data about the data. You have information like often where the tweet came from,
Warren Buffett.
the location.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I mean the actual like geolocation. You have information about the author. You have lots of metadata, so you can look at that as well. So we receive tweets, including the text and all the metadata about that tweet as well.
So you put it in a database.
We do,
With
yes.
various fields, many fields.
Oh, and then we have all our own information that we implicitly figure out and then add that to the tweet.
Okay, so
we build more metadata around that.
Okay, well, in all the circumstances you know about this tweet, it's all going in this database.
Right.
And now the database, can you tell me what kind of database it is? You want to release that?
Without getting into all the details of the tech stack, we have an enormous database that stores terabytes of data as we pull in interesting tweets and information about the people who tweet and who they're connected to. So it's a big data company. We deal with a lot of data.
Okay, so it's a third party.
It's us. It's all context.
It's all context. It's your server and everything?
We're in a cloud, so we work with a joint cloud.
Okay.
But it's our software. It's 100% context proprietary technology.
So now you have the terabytes of data that came from the 500 million tweets, for example, and you want to look through that and make something of it. So now you've got to scan it for words, and you got to have an algorithm that can make something of it.
So that gets into the realm of, there's a lot of different things you can do there. You can look for, at the simplest level, you do keywords, and you look for things like word frequencies or co-occurrence of words, like, airplane and crash, or, there's a lot of different things that you can do in terms of looking at word pairs. But there's natural language processing, which is a field. For example, at Carnegie Mellon, there's a whole college just for natural language processing.
What is it?
Natural language processing is software understanding what people are saying with natural language. So a good example that everyone's familiar with is Siri. If you're talking to your iPhone, Siri needs to, in an algorithmic manner, break apart your sentence, understand what you're talking about, what it is you want. So that field is it's the Star Trek thing. It's when, Captain Kirk used to talk to his ship.
Oh, it sounds like such fun, actually.
It is a lot of fun. It's a tough field to be hiring in, of course, because the people who need natural language processing experts are Google, Apple, it's the giants. And so it's if you have kids and you're wondering what they should study in school and they ask you for advice, which of course they never do, natural language processing would be an excellent field to go into.
You got to begin early, like with your kids.
Yeah, I've already been talking to my 3-year-old about that.
This reminds me of a show I had in Hawaii Public Radio where I looked at an article in the New York Times, and there was a guy in the Midwest, I want to say Indiana, and he was talking about the fact that he was working in what they called I want to say social networking analysis, and he would examine the email in a given corporation, and he could tell you from the email who was really running it. So you'd have the schematic, the official legal schematic of the corporation, and then you'd have this guy. It was a different schematic. He could tell you using, analysis of power words.
Sure.
He could tell you who was telling who what to do. And one day he looked around and he found that all his colleagues that he shared, his systems and his tricks with, had all disappeared. This is in the early 2000s.
Had all disappeared?
Disappeared. They lost their jobs. They left their jobs. They were no longer available to him. They were no longer part of this community of social networking analysts. They were all in Washington. They're all working on the government, the CIA, and doing exactly the same thing in anti-terrorism, organizations. And it strikes me from that, and he was sad because they never offered him a job. but I really enjoyed the conversation with this guy. But it strikes me that what you're doing is really kissing cousin to what all those guys were doing in Washington.
Certainly the intelligence organizations are very interested in social media analysis. What he was doing sounds like influence analysis over social graphs. And it's if you can capture all the conversations and analyze them in an algorithmic way intelligently, you can derive an enormous amount of information from what seems like a very small bit to start with by doing things like crawling out on the social graph and seeing who's this person connected to, who are they connected to, what are they saying, what are they doing, when are they doing it. Social networks are fascinating from a computer science perspective because from many perspectives, because there's just so much data. It's interesting to advertisers for targeting. It's interesting to intelligence for finding out what people of interest are doing. We've chosen to focus on finance because there's a lot of things about the way that language works in the finance field that's domain specific. The simple thing is short and long means something very, very specific in finance that is different than what they mean in the general.
Your own glossary, yeah.
Right.
We can take a short break.
Okay.
We'll come back, we're going to find out, well, I don't want to say exactly how you do it, but at least something about how you do it.
Sure.
It's Dan Leuck. He's the CTO and the founder, co-founder.
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 So the CEO of the company is Ryan Bailey, and he is the co-founder.
He's a smart guy.
He is a very smart guy.
At Context, CONTIX, Inc. And it's, come from Ikezo. It's a spin-out from Ikezo right here in Hawaii. And you're watching New Media, The Bleeding Edge, and finding breaking news. We're going to get to that part on social media. That's Dan Leuck. We'll be right back.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Okay, we're back. We're live. I can hardly wait to ask my next question of Dan Leuck, the CTO and a co-founder of Context, Inc. Here we are on New Media, The Bleeding Edge, talking about finding breaking news on social media. We're sort of creeping up on this, on the core questions. Well, one question that we have to discuss on the way to the core question is, like, if you have all this data, this huge amount of data, some of which you got from, say, Twitter, others of which you got from the circumstances, who knows where, and you connect it all up, it's all kind of related or relatable. Now you want to find out valuable information that you can actually sell to people, like banks and like that, or financial institutions to help them make financial decisions. Invaluable information, by the way. It's a great idea, Dan. I'm sure you found out already. So
we think so.
How do you connect up all this information, process these 500 million daily tweets, and make sense of it? How do you reach out and touch everything at the same time?
Well, it's like the old Chinese saying, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So at the beginning, you can do things like, for example, if you shut off Justin Bieber and the Kardashians, then you've gotten rid of half of Twitter. Not literally, but a large percentage. So, I mean, some of it is just, making sure you're doing noise reduction and a lot of it's what to throw away. And then when you're on the other side, you kind of have two main aspects here. You have discovery.
Noise reduction is getting rid of the junk words.
That's right, getting rid of
Take 'em all out.
or sources.
Sources.
You probably
And
don't
sources.
want stock tips from Kim Kardashian. I mean, maybe if she's talking about handbags, but in general, you can pretty much throw that away. So once you've dealt with noise reduction, then the other side of it is discovery. You need to make sure that you're finding all the interesting information. So you can curate lists of people that have said things that are interesting in the past. In our case, people that have said things that caused a price to move on a stock. But then you also want to find interesting things said by people that are not on your lists that you can determine are likely to be reputable. And there's a lot of different ways to do it. One of the techniques is, just like traditional media, you look to say if two people are saying it, it's more likely to be true than if one person has said it. But there's a lot of other things we do, and some of them are proprietary, trade secret things that we do to find out if someone is likely to be reputable. And that reputation network is kind of one of the key value propositions.
But you're not going to discuss here at this table right now.
I can't go into all the details because
Okay, well, we don't
shockingly there are some other people interested in this space.
Shockingly.
And we know that we're doing a number of things that they aren't, and we intend to keep it that way.
Got to watch them though.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so suppose my tweet says, "Watch out for IBM, it's going up."
Mm-hmm.
You going to catch that?
If you look like someone who is reputable and relevant, that you're typically, either writing things about stocks, or you're a known entity, or we can algorithmically determine those things, then yes, we will. In fact, we frequently, both from the investor side and from when we're talking to prospective customers, they say, "Hey, there was a fire in a Tesla today. The battery caught on fire. Did you guys catch it?" And so people can do this to us they can and do this to us all the time. So what we end up having to do is go back and look at the system, see, did we find that alert? Did we find it the first time it was mentioned? And then we need to send that alert to them. Say, yes, here it is in the system. We found it at 8 o'clock Eastern time, tweeted by this person.
It's bait. It's not serious?
No, it's not bait. They're talking about an actual event that occurred, and they want to know when we saw it. Did we catch the tweet? Did we find the news?
That validation of what you said.
And then ideally also, was there an arbitrage opportunity? Did we find it far enough ahead of the price, the change being baked into the stock, that it would have been an arbitrage opportunity?
Wow, this is unlimited what's happening here.
Yes,
This is so
pretty
interesting.
intense.
You must be fascinated with it. Suppose I'm a scammer,
Mm-hmm.
and I write a Twitter to my uncle,
Mm-hmm.
a legitimate uncle,
Mm-hmm.
and I say, "Watch out for IBM, it's going down."
People
Okay?
do that a lot.
And they want to throw you off, Dan.
Yes, well, so that happens more than every day, every minute. There are people out there that are trying to push stock prices around. So people will go and they'll write, I found a prototype of the new iPhone that somebody left on a bar and it's crap. I mean, that's a made-up example. Well, there was something similar to that happened, but you need to have police tools. You need to look at does it look like this person is likely trying to push the price around? And there's, I'll give a couple of quick examples of that. But if you see someone that has a brand new Twitter account, and they maybe they're saying the same thing as 100 other very new Twitter accounts, they might be basically astroturfing. They're out there just trying to move public opinion on something, or more importantly, traders' opinions on something.
Astroturfing.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So that's a term that's used a lot on the political side, but it can be applied to trying to move stocks around. And of course, this is illegal, but it happens all the time. So we have policing tools that we use to determine if something is likely to be what we call a bad actor in the system.
This reminds me of a piece I saw a few months ago on television about how these guys were jumping ahead of the signal coming from stock houses.
Reducing the latency.
Yes, reducing the latency,
Yeah.
and in such a way, making a few pennies on millions of transactions.
Sure. So that
And it's the same thing, isn't it? Just trying to get a leg up like that.
That's mostly interesting to algorithmic traders, to quantitative strategies where a piece of software is making the decision by itself. So it has some set of criteria, and you can give it all these different inputs, including social media inputs. So for example, a huge number of mentions of a company or a product of a company probably is an indicator of volatility. These quantitative traders, if they can get information, a millisecond ahead of another program, not trader, but program, because humans don't generally operate in sub-millisecond time spans. But yeah, they can make a huge amount of money.
That's what they did, and these guys they were really smart guys. They uncovered them. They found out what was happening. It was hard to do that.
It was. I actually think that kind of trading is a little bit interesting because it's not really adding value to, you're not really, the core value of a company shouldn't really be fluctuating in that way. So I've always wondered why they didn't just pass a law that quantizes trades. So trades can only occur, for example, on the second, let's say. You can argue about the interval, and then
everybody waits.
Yeah, and then they're just executed in random order.
That's what they were going to do. In fact, that they changed the way the system worked so that it held everything up to a certain moment, and then bang, everything at the same.
That makes a lot more sense. Then
no
you don't have people
latency.
doing crazy things to optimize the network latency to get a jump in that way.
But it's just, I mentioned it only because it gives you an idea of the sophistication of some of these tools and transmission devices.
We found it's been a humbling experience seeing the level of game that people have at these larger trading entities. One fun example is we found a guy when we were looking for someone to do sales who was selling satellite imagery to hedge funds, and we saw that and we said, why would a hedge fund buy satellite imagery? And it turns out they're doing really advanced machine vision stuff, looking, for example, at if you want to know ahead of the earnings report how well Walmart is doing, you look at how many cars are in the parking lots around the world. So hedge funds are keenly interested in satellite imagery.
It's legitimate, isn't it?
It's absolutely
and
legitimate.
There's nothing illegal about taking a satellite picture of somebody's parking lot. Although I remember there was a case way back when, I think it was an airframe manufacturer was involved, and it was inappropriate. The court found against somebody who was flying over the factory and watching it. But I think that's probably not the law anymore. Satellite, you can see everything.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, this is stuff that people sell higher resolution versions, but a lot of these things you can see just on Google.
So I have a vision of you and your team, and it's like NCIS, and somebody runs in and says, Dan, did you see this? 100 guys saying the same thing, and they all signed up on Twitter yesterday. There's something really fishy. It sounds like a TV program. NCIS, there it is. And Dan says, yeah, there's something fishy about that. So we'd better adjust our conclusion or something.
So hopefully in that situation, my response could be, our system knew that and ignored it. If that's not the right answer, then what we do is there's a couple things we can do. One is we go in and we look at could we add something to the algorithms or tweak the algorithms to catch this case that we found that slipped through. The other thing we can do is we can simply tell the system you were wrong. And there's a learning mechanism built into the system.
Artificial intelligence. Yeah.
There's a component that can be like a human told it's wrong and go and analyze, even if we don't know exactly why it was wrong, what similar things it's seen, and not have that happen again if a similar situation comes up again.
So you wrote code that would learn.
Yes.
And you wrote it. I don't mean you, but the company
wrote it. Yes.
And you wrote a lot of code to make all these instantaneous decisions about the fire hydrant of tweets.
Yes.
And look through all that stuff and check everything against everything. And that happened right here in Hawaii.
Yes. In fact, Context has today 12 people. 10 of them are in Hawaii, including all the management. One is on the Big Island, the other 9 are here, and then we have 2 people that are outside of Hawaii. But we intend to continue to grow. Obviously, sales and business development will need to continue to be grown in places like New York, London, Tokyo, but development and operations, our plan is to keep that here.
Why do you have to grow in those other cities? Why can't you grow in Makaloa Street?
Well, there are some hedge funds in Hawaii, but we don't have any, 15, hedge funds with $15 billion AUM.
You want to be right there, right next to them.
Yes, you have to.
It's a credibility thing.
It's that, and it's just when you're selling, you have to, a lot of times when you're selling to these really large institutions, there's a lot of face time that's required.
Yeah.
So sales and business development will always have to have some capacity as we grow in those locations.
High tech humanity, it has to be together.
It does, and sometimes too, the exact same thing that you say in an email when you say it in person can have a very different impact. An example of that would be, one of the key things that we do differently than our competition is that when we find something that's been said on Twitter, even if we find the very first mention anywhere in social media, it doesn't mean that it hasn't already been surfaced by traditional media like Bloomberg or Reuters or these other traditional media sources. So we actually need to analyze, and we do analyze from hundreds of sources, traditional media, and we look to see, when we find out what looks like breaking news on social media, we look to see has it already been mentioned on mainstream media, and if so, we don't send it because it's not going to be something that presents an arbitrage opportunity. Or if we see that probably this was said and this was a little bit different, so maybe the social media is adding some color, some additional information to something said in traditional media, we'll cluster that together, and we deliver clusters of news that include both traditional and social media components.
That's what I want to talk about next.
Okay.
I want to talk about delivery. Okay,
right.
That's Dan Leuck, Context Inc., New Media, The Bleeding Edge, finding breaking news on social media. We'll be right back after this break. We're going to find out exactly what Dan presents to the client.
Well, I'll show you a screenshot of the actual app.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Seymour Kazimirski. I host a show called Seymour's World on ThinkTech Hawaii. What is it all about? It's about you. It's about your experiences, my experiences, how we live life together. I'd like you to be my guest, listening in on what we have to say about today's world. Please be my guest on Seymour's World at ThinkTech Hawaii.
Aloha, my name is David Day, and I'm really interested in international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security, and that's why I host ThinkTech Global. I bring in guests from all over the world who know about these various issues in enormous depth and detail. Come learn with me every Thursday afternoon right here at 4 o'clock. I'll see you there.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here. We're getting close to the center of the universe here with Dan Leuck and Context Inc. It's a fantastic. It's finding breaking news on social media. You must have to work very hard to keep up with changes. The whole thing is so dynamic. If you miss a beat, you're behind already. You sleep?
Absolutely.
Do you actually rest?
I sleep very little, and the
good.
CEO sleeps very little, and so does the team works hard. Everyone has the religion, which is exciting. It's got a great team dynamic.
Yeah.
And we have that at Keizo, and I was happy that when Context spun out, it had the same sort of fervor.
That's great. So anyway, in going to the question here, so now you've looked at the fire hydrant, you've checked all the relationships, you've looked at some external data, you've looked at the real news, not the real, I'm sorry, I said
Traditional
that.
news.
The conventional news.
Sure.
And conventional in this case means online too, because conventional no longer includes print press. That's the archaic news. Anyway, you looked at that, you've compared notes, and now you're ready to report to the client. Excuse me. Do you take a walk down to the client's office there on, the street in Manhattan, Wall Street?
Yes.
And say, hi, my name is Dan, I'm here with a little pouch for you, a little portfolio of inside information, or is there some other way you do this?
So the answer is generally is yes, and but it's changing. What we've been focused on really to date has been institutional customers, and in fact we were only selling to institutional customers. So we looked at the largest investment banks, hedge funds, investment management companies, and we used our network to get in and actually walk into their offices and sit down and say, this is Context, this is how it works. We configure it for them. Okay, you're what kind of trader are you? What instrument do you trade in? What's your strategy? And then we'd help set up the columns to show the alerts that would be relevant to them. And I can show you an example of that here. What's changed is we actually are going to introduce in the next about 2 weeks a new product that's geared toward high-end, kind of sophisticated individual traders as well. And it's priced to that rather than priced to an investment bank or hedge fund. And it has a lot of the core features that are valuable to traders. So
is it scaled down or simplified?
It's scaled down a bit, so it doesn't look at quite as many of the traditional sources, because we deliver both social and traditional, which is another and cluster that as I described. And it doesn't have some things that relate to sentiment analysis, but it does deliver alerts, just as the Context Pro product does.
Sentiment analysis?
Yes.
God, that's scary. You mean you're looking into somebody's emotional state of mind?
Yes.
And trying to figure out how real that is?
We do, and we provide that information. I think that what's been discovered over time, because people got really excited about this when there was a paper that was written about sentiment analysis in the stock market, and the first attempts weren't really very successful because they looked at sentiment kind of in an isolated way, and you really need to have that sentiment in context with what's happening, what was said, what's the velocity of mentions about this, things like that. When you add sentiment into something where you have the context of it, then it can be useful. But by itself, it turned out not to be as useful, because if people, sometimes you can't really trade on just a general sort of fuzzy emotional state.
Sounds kind of a loop, though. I mean, you get the sentiment comes out of the facts, and now you're turning the sentiment back into the facts.
Well, there's a lot of things, like some of the early attempts were looking at not sentiment around a particular company, but around the market in general. And at a certain point, it becomes so generalized, it's almost a chaotic system. There's nothing predictive about it. The other thing is when you're doing sentiment, it's useful to know things like who is expressing this sentiment. Because if it's coming from an expert pool, for example, that's different than if it's coming from the general public. Those are just a few examples, but there's more to. There can be value in sentiment, but you have to be careful about how it's applied, and it has to have context.
Okay, well, show us the report. And is this the report for the enterprise level big institution, or is this for the high-end investor individually?
This particular screen looks almost the same in both products, actually. There are some alerts that you will get in the Pro product that you wouldn't in the base, but the screen looks very similar.
So take us through the screen.
Okay, so we have the screen up?
Yeah.
Great. So you'll see that basically anyone who's used TweetDeck, for example, which is the product from Twitter that lets you easily manage different groups of people and different accounts, this will look somewhat familiar. It is based on the column sort of visual paradigm, and you can configure a column for an industry. So you can say, I want to see tech. You can configure it for a list of companies. You say, for example, I'm interested only in seeing Google, Apple, and Amazon. You can have a column for that. And we've now introduced in beta form, we have topics. So you can listen to something like supply chain interruption or things relating to natural disasters, or there's lots of different things that you can configure for a column.
Let's make it up. I can't see exactly what the report is about, but and then we can go to the report. But suppose I limit this to iPhone 6 plus bending, breaking, whatever it is. Okay, what's it going to tell me if I ask it a question like that?
So we deal with we don't deal as much like at the raw keyword space. So you would say you're interested in Apple.
Yeah.
Our system knows about the products that Apple has. It knows about all the different ways that Apple is referenced. It can be referenced by its ticker, by its legal name, by its common name. And
because it's business. It's all the business uses of the term. Yeah?
Right. So we deal kind of at a conceptual level, and there's keyword stuff that happens underneath that. But so you would express an interest in a topic or a company, and then we would deliver you, for example, if you look here, you can see examples of the first column is technology sector on the left-hand side, and there you'll see tweets, for example, that the CEO of a particular technology company just sold 20% of his ownership in the company. That would be an example of an alert. Merger and acquisition.
And you've made that judgment. You've said this is something. We're going to call this an alert.
Yes, we've basically looked at it and said this is relevant to a company. And in the concept space, what's going on is something that's likely to have some sort of impact on the price.
Okay.
So certainly, the CEO of a company selling his own stock in the company would be something people would look at, basically.
But
right?
You have made a list somewhere deep in the bowels of this thing, that says, these are the kinds of things which are relevant to how the price might go.
Exactly.
And one of them is where the CEO sells a lot of stock.
That's an example. Another one would be rumors of mergers and acquisitions. It would be people saying things about a product before the product is generally available. It would be, if you're an airline and something's wrong with the plane, that's not going to be good for you. So things relating to basically the health of vehicles, of anyone that makes vehicles. There are lawsuits. We found a situation where someone tweeted about Halliburton having settled with the DOJ before it was widely known. That's an interesting example of where an alert comes out and your average trader might not know what to do with it, because basically what Halliburton had done is they admitted to destruction of evidence, which sounds really bad, and your average retail trader may have sold all their Halliburton, where the experts in the area knew that that was the lesser of other charges, and they knew the maximum penalty was minimal, so they actually went long. So a lot of times we're delivering alerts. At this point, we've gotten good at knowing what alerts are likely to be interesting to traders, but sometimes what the trader will do with it isn't obvious, so we don't crawl that far up the stack.
Speaking of immediately, I mean, is this refreshed every millisecond or every hour or every day?
It depends on the alert, but you're talking down in the second range. The app you see right here is a web app, but it's actually alerts coming in real time, so they'll appear and they'll
So you see a change, like a stock report.
These columns, new ones come in the top, and then they just kind of pushes everything down.
Are they
so you'll
changing
see,
now if I watch?
Oh, this is just a screenshot because I didn't know if we'd have connectivity for sure.
Right, okay.
But in the actual app, they will come at the top. You'd see them pulse, and they'd push all the other alerts down, and it would appear at the top. And then it has an age indicator. It's green until, along the left-hand side if it's a new alert. And then as it gets pushed down, the green kind of fades. So a quick scan, if you're a trader, most traders have 6 or 8 screens around them. So they need to very quickly see if news is fresh. And so we've worked a lot with, for example, color and the semantics of color. And that's where we benefited from Ikezo's expertise in user experience design, having serviced the finance industry for almost a decade. So we know kind of how the trader thinks and how to catch their attention.
Yeah.
So a lot of thought and work went into that.
Yeah, well, I can imagine how exciting it would be if you were trading in a few stocks and you could get this kind of instant news and update about things that nobody else knows, really. Nobody else knows this stuff. It's coming out later, but you get it now.
That's right.
Because social media is always ahead of traditional news, right?
It's not always. So that's actually an incorrect assumption that we made in the beginning. And so we would find some of the feedback we got early on from the hedge funds and investment banks we were working with was that, hey, you found this thing. It was the first mention on Twitter, but Twitter in this case was late. Because it had already been written about, the Wall Street Journal had some source inside the company that knew about this, and they were the source. So social media just was echoing what they already said. That's when we figured out, hey, what we really need to do is look at both.
Wall Street Journal too, yeah.
Yeah, you got to look at both.
And see what's going on.
And see where it breaks.
You don't want to get caught short. Yeah.
Right, and we surface the traditional media and social right next to each other so that you don't have to look at 10 different apps. You can just be looking at context.
Oh, that's so cool.
And we can push it to iPhones. There's an iPhone app for it now. We can push it to your desktop through native notifications. We can push it through many different channels now.
So if I'm an ordinary stunk investor, $1.50, is it worth it for me to get this product?
Obviously I'm biased, but I would say certainly it is. I mean, it's giving you a sophisticated news tool that's on the level of what you see when you walk around trading floors, which I do, so I know what's being used. And very soon you're going to be able to go to context.com and self-provision and just sign up for it yourself. Right now, it's because it's institutionally geared, you have to contact us and we go through a vetting process.
It doesn't have to be that way. And
it doesn't, no.
That would be pretty interesting. Look at your phone, sit on the sidewalk, make trades on the latest information in the world. Wow, amazing.
It's really fun. I mean, I use the app for many hours every day. And when I'm in New York doing sales, for example, I'm walking around with my iPhone app looking at news. And if I'm walking in to talk to a bank or a hedge fund, I'm certainly looking if there's any news about them I should be aware of.
Sure, what a great sales point. Yeah. Did you know about this?
Yes.
And he says, no, I didn't know about that.
And that's happened. Another really funny thing that happened is an alert came up about a guy that I was talking to when I was selling. So, he said, well, show me some interesting alerts. And I found an alert. He was a leading biotech analyst. And we found an alert about something he said at a convention, and it was right there with his name in it. So that was really fun. Yeah.
Well, I have 2 things left before we close on this. The first thing is, it sounds to me, I could be wrong, but this is going to be pervasive into the marketplace of anyone who cares and who acts on financial information, which is an awful lot of people in the world today.
Yes.
And it will, it would pervade the market if given a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And if it pervades the market, it's going to speed up the market, kind of, isn't it? I mean, more information, more trades, more immediacy.
Yes.
What do you think is going to happen with this product if it does what you want it to do?
Well, anytime you find more information and disseminate it more widely, the market becomes more efficient. So over time, yes, you will see the arbitrage opportunities shorten because more people are getting more data faster. And that's already something that's happening. And sometimes over time you have tools that go from being offensive to being defensive. You need it because other people have it, and if they get the jump on you, then you're going to lose out. So, but there's a lot of horizontal growth. There's a lot of things you can look at. There's an almost infinite number of topics that you can find that are relevant to the valuation of companies. And so fintech companies, financial technology companies, have to be both defensive and offensive in finding new ways to provide value over time.
Ah, fantastic. Now, what about you know, as I mentioned before, this is a dynamic field. It's completely dynamic. There are guys who would love to eat your lunch.
Sure.
And probably try all day in their own way, because it's, you know, there's a pot of gold here at the end of the rainbow. So you have got to keep up. So
We do.
where do you get the kind of talent that you need to write not only the code, but the word algorithms, the language questions? It's not just a computer geek code writer person. It's somebody who profoundly understands the language in general. Where do you
Absolutely.
find people like that?
It's very hard, and Hawaii can work for you or against you. It can work against you because it is especially if you're hiring only in Hawaii, you might have a challenge finding a really specialized person, and that's not specific to technology. I mean, the medical, like people that run hospitals here will tell you the same thing. But at the same time, it's a very desirable place to live. You do benefit from people coming here because they want to live here who are leaders in certain fields. Hawaii also produces a lot of smart people who leave. And so we also really like it if we can find someone who's from Hawaii that went to the mainland, maybe for study or for a great job, and then give them an opportunity to come home. And that's true at Akeso and Context have that philosophy. So you can do it. We do benefit from Akeso having been working at that problem of getting the best people over almost a decade now, and so we use Akeso's tricks, and then Context has, of course, come up with a lot of its own approaches to this, because Context does have a lot of needs in areas like big data, data science, natural language processing, NLP, statistics, things like that.
They could be anywhere, or do you want them here?
Our preference is to have them here, but if we find someone who's the foremost NLP expert in the world, and they happen to live in Iowa, then we'll certainly have a conversation.
NLP, natural language processing. See?
Right.
See? And I guess the last question is, where can this go beyond the financial marketplace? And I don't mean to counterintelligence. I mean just to the human condition. Is there an area beyond financial decision making where this could be useful? And have you thought about that?
Oh, sure. We think about it all the time, and we get that question almost every time we talk to an investor or customer. They ask about that. So the answer is there are companies that do this generally, and there's some companies that do it reasonably well, but they're never going to get the same amount of quality in terms of the discovery piece, finding everything that's interesting, and the noise reduction piece as a company that just does finance, because the language is specific to the domain, and what parts of the context are relevant is specific to the domain. There are people that specialize in doing this in other areas and are very good at it, for example, in the intelligence space, and strategic communication space and brand management, and there are companies that do this in all of these different niches. But we're finance.
Public opinion. And that
political
means
analysis.
politics.
Yeah.
Politics.
A company called Future Recorded does that very well.
Yeah.
You'll see that they tweet out what's happening in terms of news and opinions, sentiment relating to candidates and elections. I think they have a pair with some news organization. I think it's CNN.
There's no stopping you now, Dan. That's Dan Leuck. And remember, the context is in the context. Or was it the context is in the context?
That's right.
Anyway, that's Dan Leuck.
Thank you very much, Jay.
Context Inc. Thank you very much. The Bleeding Edge.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Aloha.